Hey, it's Jessica Honegger, founder of the socially conscious fashion brand Noonday Collection. Welcome to the Going Scared podcast. Welcome back, everyone. If you're new to the Going Scared podcast, we cover all things social impact, entrepreneurship, and courage. We've had so many people share their brave stories so far on the podcast, but today's really moved me. It is such a powerful story of courage. Today's guests, Patrick Gray and Justin Skeesuck, demonstrate incredible courage in their friendship, in facing Justin's terminal neuromuscular disease, and in looking at life through the lens of possibility instead of scarcity. Justin has a degenerative neuromuscular disease very similar to ALS that has slowly caused him to lose all mobility from his neck down. But that didn't stop him from wanting to hike 500 miles across Spain on the Camino de Santiago in a wheelchair. What do you do when you want to hike the Camino Santiago in a wheelchair? You reach out and ask your best friend if he'll do it with you. When Justin reached out to Patrick, Patrick's first reply was, "I'll push you." Today's podcast is all about what it looks like when we come together and we push one another through our dreams, through our fears, through our friendships, and through our very lives. I was deeply impacted by today's conversation. It has stuck with me for days, and I know that you will be too. Hey, Justin and Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having us.
So excited to have you on. I heard about you guys from my business partner who met you at a conference, but then I was walking through the airport. I can't remember which airport it was, about a month ago. And I saw your book.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? It's been a journey for us that we never thought we would ever be on. So we can talk about that more about that later. But
yeah, so we are going to get into you guys' story. And there's so many different pieces I could pull out for our listeners to hear. But I do think friendship, obviously, is one of the key themes in your story. And so I would love for you to start off with what you can each answer this. What is your first memory together? Like what comes to mind? I mean, we're probably going back to the womb here.
We are.
Yeah, it's close. So Justin and I were born, just a little over 36 hours apart. So there's no real space in our brains where there's memories without each other. So finding just one, I don't know, but I would say that one of the most vivid ones for me is just being kids playing in this field behind our church, digging holes in the dirt and making forts and
throwing dirt clods.
There were weeds that were probably, in my mind, they were like 8 feet tall. They're probably like 1.5 feet tall. But we would like press down the weeds and make little paths to the weeds and pretend we were soldiers crawling through the dirt.
Yeah, G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I think we all have these memories of these childhood friendships. Like I can definitely think of, childhood memories similar to that, but I'm not friends with those people anymore in my memories. What has kept you guys now friends for 40 years? What do you think has enabled that friendship to stand the test of time?
This is Justin talking. I would say the thing at the top of the mountain for us is just intentionality. We are very intentional with one another. And, we grew up in the same small town in Eastern Oregon, right on the Idaho border. And so we spent a lot of time together as kids. But then as we got older, I went to San Diego for college, and then Patrick stayed up here in Idaho area where we both live now. But I went to San Diego for a stint for about 20 years, almost 21 years. And during that whole span, almost, over about half our friendship, we were apart. But we were very intentional with one another, meaning we would call each other probably every couple of weeks. We would chat. If we had a break, if I had a spring break, I would come up to visit. If Pat had a spring break, he would come down to visit me and stay with me. And we would that's what we have just done. We've been very intentional with one another.
And it's something where in hindsight, we've kind of taken the relationship we have for granted until recently. But really what we've kind of grabbed onto is that a lot of the same rules that apply to our marriages, to our wives, apply to our friendship, apply to friendship with other people, to our relationships with our kids. And it's just that intentionally pursuing time with one another. And proximity doesn't have to be the same space. It's just that really just being fully present in the moments you do have.
I love that, because I think that I grew up in a community where it's very common to move back to that community and raise your kids in that community. I'm sort of an outlier that I didn't do that. And so I think a lot of actually people I grew up with are still friends with their childhood friends. And I love knowing that you guys actually are not proximate to one another. And yet your intentionality is what has kept this friendship going. And so I think that gives a lot of hope to people, because I think some people can look at your friendship and think, well, I'm not in the same town as my childhood friend anymore. So that's just not possible. But really you're saying that's not part of the secret sauce.
No, we did that for 20 years. We made it happen in spite of the fact we were 1,000 miles apart. Now we're 2 miles apart, which is awesome. But, but yeah, it's definitely achievable. It takes work.
Yeah,
but it can be done.
It can be done. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of your story, Justin. You have been dealing with symptoms of a neuromuscular disease. And tell us about when you first discovered that you had this disease, and then walk us through when you realized it was going to mean eventually a life of immobility.
Yeah, so, I grew up most of my childhood just as I guess what you'd say, a quote unquote normal child, just doing normal things. I was very active in sports. I played tennis and soccer, and Patrick even convinced me to play football one year in high school, which I think I was probably the worst football player on the team. But and he's laughing at me right now. That's what he's doing, because he knows that for sure. And I know that for sure. But about just shy of my 16th birthday, I was driving with another friend of ours from our hometown to another town. It's about 30 minutes away to play at a basketball tournament. And he ended up rolling his truck on the freeway going about 80 miles an hour. And I actually, I came away from the car accident just completely shaken up, some scrapes and bruises. It was a pretty crazy thing that I went through, but that's kind of the start of it all. And what happened was about 6 months later, I was running down the soccer field that following fall, and I started noticing my left foot was flopping around. It wasn't working the way that it normally should. And so I brought it to my parents' attention, and, you naturally go see a doctor, and he was completely stumped. So he's like, I think you need to go see a neurologist. So, at the time I thought that maybe the car accident I was in, I punctured pinched a nerve on my back or did something along that line. But I had no numbness, no pain, none of that. It just my foot wasn't working. And so, it's a very long story, but I end up seeing just a ton of neurologists, going through a ton of testing. I did muscle biopsies. I had MRIs. I had, everything you can do, blood tests, nerve testing. And I ended up first in about 3 years later, I was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. I was in my early 20s at that time. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. It's kind of surreal having a doctor sit you down on a table and say, you got about 4 years to live. But I knew in my heart it wasn't quite right. So we kept pushing for some sort of treatment or some sort of name to it, and it didn't quite fit the ALS bucket. But I ended up getting diagnosed with a very rare progressive neuromuscular disease called multifocal acquired motor axonopathy.
Wow.
The reason why I was diagnosed with ALS or Lou Gehrig's is because the disease I have is very, very, very similar. It's almost identical. There's just a few outliers that are a little different. The outcome is still the same, meaning my life will be most likely cut short, just due to complications from the disease that I have. But it gets worse over time, and it was actually triggered after going through all of the testing, going through everything I went through. It was triggered by that car accident. I was just genetically dispositioned to have it. My parents just happened to have the genes, and it would have shown symptoms later on in life. Now I'm in my early 40s, so it probably would have shown symptoms now or maybe in my 50s, but it triggered it way early. And so, it's to give your listeners context. It started my left foot, and then it's worked its way all the way through my body. So now I'm at a point where my arms and my hands don't work as well as they should, and I have to be cared for the moment I get up every day till the moment I go to bed at night. So that's everything. I mean, feeding, going to the bathroom, getting my clothes on, showering, everything that you use your hands and and I can't walk anymore, so I'm in a power wheelchair. So it's a challenge for sure. And but it sounds weird, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I know it's a little bit of an oxymoron, because the disease process has opened my eyes to what life holds, and that we don't have a ton of time on this planet, and you have to make the best of it.
Well, and that your attitude comes through so clearly through the book. And just thank you for sharing your story. I'm curious, Patrick. We can all have walked through a suffering with a friend, and I'm imagining, Patrick, you don't live close to Justin during this time of the degeneration really taking place, and so you see each other not super frequently. So what was that like for you as you would see Justin, your friend, occasionally, and it just kind of started dawning on you what this was going to mean for Justin? And then how did you determine to be a part of walking with him through suffering and joy?
Yeah, the time we spent apart, it was difficult. And I don't want to sugarcoat it by any means. When you have someone who's dealing with this type of degeneration, but there weren't a whole lot of surprises early on. I would say the first 10 years or so of his disease progression, because we kept in contact so much. We'd take trips together. He would keep me apprised of different types of developments. And so while the disease stayed to his waist and below, it didn't faze me a whole lot, just because Justin's positivity was so just so evident. But I would say when it really became difficult was when he's living down in San Diego, I'm up in Idaho, and he starts to lose the function of his upper body. So now the implications of that are huge for a number of reasons. One, Justin's a graphic designer. So suddenly in 2010, when he loses his hands, his ability to put food on the table is compromised significantly. His wife is having to take care of him full time now, as opposed to him being able to maneuver in a manual wheelchair. Now he's in a power chair. He has to be fed. He has to be helped in the bathroom, all these things. And to have that happen when I'm not there, that was tough. That was really hard. And so what we would do is I would come down, or I'd fly down to San Diego and give his wife 3 or 4 days of respite so she could go and recharge. And I'd help Justin and take care of the kids and just take advantage of the time that we did have together. But seeing that progression, it was really hard. In fact, what I would say, what happened for me when in 2010, it was January of 2010 when Justin lost his hands. And he called me and told me on the phone that this dysfunction was going away. That was the first time that I had heard him scared about his disease. Even though there was all this struggle, having to transfer into a manual wheelchair, all these major life moments that were challenging, he never seemed scared. But at that point, that shook me. And he dealt with a lot of, darkness in those moments. But I kind of went down my own trail of darkness because I became very angry at God, very angry at the situation. I felt like God had failed to answer my prayer that I've been praying for years. And I prayed more fervently, but I also became more angry. And about 2 years later in 2012, when he was up visiting in Idaho, he and his wife and kids, it was after a church service where a gentleman had taken Justin aside and was asking him some questions. And the conversation was, intense in the fact that it was just very focused and there was something very serious being spoken about. And so I always joke about this, but I do what best friends do. I leaned in and eavesdropped. But what the guy asked Justin was, if you could have your hands and feet back and be quote unquote normal, would you choose it? And Justin said no.
Wow.
So it was in that moment that I realized I'd been praying the wrong prayer. I had been fighting the wrong fight. I had created a battle for myself as opposed to fighting Justin's battle with him. I wanted a miracle as in full restoration. But the reality was the miracle had already happened because he was able to face this disease and this unknown future with grace and dignity. And all he needed was hands and feet. And I had not seen that for what it was. I just needed to step in and embrace the relationship we have and be hands and feet. And once that happened, there was a whole new landscape of intimacy and intentionality, pursuit, and adventure that opened up for us.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. Just the power of surrender and stepping into his story with him instead of bringing your baggage kind of along with him. And that is what brings you guys to this insane idea, by the way, completely insane. I mean, it's insane to walk the Camino de Santiago just if you have mobility. And so you guys start tossing around this idea after seeing a show on public access about the Camino Santiago in Spain. And it's a 500-mile trek through crazy terrain. I mean, when I'm like, okay, 500-mile trek. I mean, isn't it? It's probably paved and flat. No, it is not. Not at all.
It's not.
And you're tossing around this idea. And I love what you say. One of the parts I underline in the book, it says that you say, we've revisited the idea and talked about how it might come together, but the right time just hasn't revealed itself. Maybe there will never be a right time, just a right mindset. And so speak to that, because I think there's a lot of us that have these little ideas that feel insane, or who knows, all the different stories we tell ourselves about the ideas and dreams that we have. And you're saying it's not about time, it's about mindset. So tell me about each of your mindset as you are committing to make this a reality.
I would, this is Justin talking. I would say that, mindset is a huge, huge part of how Patrick and I not only operate individually, but how we operate together as friends. And there's a lot of things that go into it, but the biggest thing that we've kind of made our mantra is that it's not how we do something, it's why we do something. It's the following our heart versus letting the logistics get into the way. And if the mindset is looking at, okay, this crazy pilgrimage, this crazy journey had never been done in a wheelchair, and it's like almost 2,000 year history, 1,000 something year history. It's you can look at it and go, oh man, it's going to be hard. And oh man, I don't want to do that because, insert fear, XYZ. And, or excuse XYZ. And what we've just leaned on with one another is that, you know what, our heart is telling us to do this. And we don't know the outcome. We don't know how it's going to go. We don't know if we're going to make it past the first day. We don't know, we just don't know until you try. And that's how we kind of just jumped into this journey together, and beyond has been following our heart, following what we believe in, and letting it unfold in front of you how it's supposed to unfold. And can be scary, but it's also really awesome because we had so many people step into our path to help us, to provide encouragement, to, and that's everything from financial support through just prayer, through not just prayer, through prayer, which is a huge part of it, through so many aspects. I mean, it would be way too long to go through all of them, but we just learned that we follow our heart.
Yeah. When that's what struck me so much during the book. I have to say, okay, this is honest truth. I'm starting to read the book and I'm immediately thinking, whoa, I can't believe Patrick has like the guts and like to decide to push his best friend. And I was really kind of fixated on the courage that would take. But as I'm reading the book, I am like, oh my gosh, Justin, who is not mobile, had the courage to ask his best friend to push him. And just that reality of surrendering your reality and allowing someone in. I mean, it is such vulnerability that is what I think has been one of my biggest takeaways from this book.
What happened is that after Justin had discovered about this journey, he recorded an episode off of Rick Steves, actually. And I was down in San Diego with my family visiting, and he had recorded this episode, wanted to show it to me. I had no idea what we were going to sit down and watch. So just he and I are in the living room watching this thing unfold. And at the end of this episode, that's all about Spain and various historical events, but focuses pretty heavily on the Camino. He just turns to me and says, "Hey, so you want to go across 500 miles in northern Spain with me?" And just very nonchalant. And I didn't really think about my answer. It wasn't like I was processing how we're going to do this. Like Justin said, the how doesn't really enter our brains from the standpoint of something to overcome. It's just that'll work itself out if it's important. And it was important to him. He was excited about it. So I just said, "Yeah, I'll push you." I had no idea what I was getting into, mind you.
Yeah, neither of us did.
Yeah.
If we did, we wouldn't do it. That's the beauty of ignorance.
Probably so. And to answer your question from earlier, am I an Ironman, that kind of thing? No. I mean, I've always been an outdoor kind of an adventure junkie. Rock climbing, cliff jumping, backpacking kind of thing, but never 500 miles, never an Ironman, no marathons. Just I enjoy being outdoors and a challenge, and this definitely fit both of those criteria.
Yeah.
Okay, obviously, as I'm reading your book, I'm thinking your wives are freaking heroes. Like, I want to bow down to them. What? They're like, yeah, go for it. Leave me for a couple months. I don't know if you're actually going to come home on the other side of it. Tell me more about the reaction of your family and friends.
For me, my wife, Kirsten, we've always operated from the mindset, even when we first met, we're going on 18 years this year being married. And we've always operated from like, okay, if we both believe in something or one of us believes in something, then it's kind of it's a no-brainer, reaction. It's like, okay, you believe in it. All right, we'll figure it out. I mean, it's literally like that. And when I first had the idea, even before I brought it up to Patrick about doing this pilgrimage, she was in the other room. I had just watched that episode that we referred to, and I called her in and I said, "So, what do you think?" And her response was, I mean, it was so quick. She just said, if you want to go do it, go do it. I mean, it was like that. And I was like, okay, and maybe she was looking for an excuse to kick me out of the house for a month to get a break. I don't know. But, she's such an amazing, strong woman that, she does so much for me. She cares for me. She's my primary caregiver. She takes a role that most spouses don't do. Patrick is, I call Patrick is the vice president of my inner circle. My wife is my president and CEO, but she's the one who cares for me all the time. And she was like, yeah, I mean, no big deal. She wasn't really worried about the outcome. She wasn't really worried about if I was going to come back or not. I don't think I was even worried about that at all. It was just more like, we're going to go give it a shot. And she was like, all right, cool. And then your wife.
It was more the condition that we would come back in.
Yes.
No. For me, my wife, Donna, we've been married for 20 years now. And she's like Kirsten, a very strong woman. We married way out of our leagues in every aspect. Mm-hmm. And she's tough as nails. And I would say her response evolved over time. There was never any doubt. Initially, Justin and I had been talking about doing a trip of some sort. And when this came up, we proposed it, of course, to her right away when I'm down there in San Diego. She's like, all right, so when? Like, we don't know. And that was kind of where we left it, It was just okay, do it. And as we got closer, while it was definitely an exercise in faith for all of us, there was never a whole lot of doubt or fear that entered into the equation. It was just a mindset of, okay, it's important to you, so I'm going to make it important to me. And that's really kind of how we've operated as individuals and as well as couples, is that like this was important to Justin. And we believe shared adventure is such a critical part of any successful relationship, whether it's with your kids, your spouse, or your friends. And so why wouldn't I want to dive into this with Justin? And from our wives' perspectives, like why wouldn't we want our husbands to have this experience? It's their adventure. We're not on it with them, but we're going to make it important to us. So they know that they have 100% clearance and we have their back the entire way.
So have you guys all gone on adventure together since this trip? Or I'm sure this entire journey has ended up being an insane adventure, because we haven't even gotten into the fact that you ended up turning your whole journey into a documentary. But I'm curious, like, have you gone, or is this just taken up too much of your life recently?
We've made space, definitely. And when I say adventure, it doesn't have to be some 500 miles in Spain.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Right. Yeah. But simple as just going on a weekend with friends to wine country, or spending some time with just the four of us on one of our business trips, that kind of stuff. We've made that happen consistently. And
even before the pilgrimage.
Yeah. I mean, we spent almost a month in Europe, just the four of us in 2001. So we've made those things happen, and that's just become part of our DNA. Whatever excites us, let's try and make it happen, and you go do it. I would say one of our most enjoyable recent trips was spending 4 days in Napa and Sonoma, County down in California. I just had a blast with our wives. That kind of stuff you have to make space for.
So great, so true. When we couldn't even rub pennies together, we would just get on Priceline and put in like $50 and just go spend the night at a hotel downtown in Austin. Call that our adventure.
Yeah.
But you know what? Those are very important and critical parts in not only a marriage, but also friendships, that you just carve out time for one another, and we can all make time for one another. There really is no excuse. If it's important to you, I mean, at least in my opinion, there's really no excuse. If it's important to you and that person is important to you, then you'll make time.
Absolutely.
And it takes, yet again, intentionality. It does. That's what it really boils down to.
So much intention. Okay. So let's head to Spain. I know I have my story of what I thought was like so brutal, was when you guys like thought you were taking a shortcut, but it wasn't a shortcut. And I was in pain with you guys. And so
It really sucked.
Oh my gosh. And you had so many people come alongside you. I love the story of the Australian ranger who's like, I'm just imagining his accent, like, I'm gonna help you out now, mate.
Yeah.
And
yeah. That's about it. That's a really bad Australian accent, but hey.
It's horrible. Let's face it. I can't do accents. Okay. So you make a wrong turn. What was y'all's most like, oh my gosh, story? Like painful.
Painful story. That was definitely a rough one.
Okay. Did I name it? I named it.
When Justin, Ted, and I got lost, Ted was a friend of ours that was with us for the first 10 days or so. We were convinced it was a shortcut.
On the map, it said it was.
We always are.
Stupid
always
map.
Convinced. Yeah, good lessons, right? And the amount of work we had to do to get back to a point that we had just been at 2 hours prior.
Oh my gosh.
So really not a shortcut. It was just as hard as the rest of the day. It was like we doubled the amount of work we had to do because what starts off as a nice little trail turns into a Jeep trail. So there's ruts from people's rigs, and weeds are stuck in Justin's wheels, bugs everywhere.
Chiggers all over me. Oh, it sucked.
It was really bad.
Sucked.
And then we get to the very spot we were trying to avoid. We wind up back at
10 feet down from where we would have been.
That is insane. That is insane.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest things I would say physically. I mean, the first day, the Pyrenees is rough too. I mean, you're climbing, 4,100 feet of elevation gain over 13 miles, a 17-mile day in total. That's a rough day with a wheelchair.
Through mud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would have to say, though, the hardest parts weren't actually physical.
Mm-hmm.
They're the emotional and spiritual, not turmoil, just wrestling you do with yourself. Because anytime you go on a journey like this, you have a lot of time to think. You have a lot of time to process. And one particular thing I think it was hard for both of us. I don't want to tell Justin's story by any means, but for me, we were in an area called the Meseta, which is just a long, flat stretch of nothing. It's just wheat fields. It's pretty, but it never changes. And you get into a situation where there's that monotonous landscape. You're forced inward and
for hours on end.
For hours, yeah, and days on end. And you come face to face with some pretty hard things just because you're truly alone with yourself. Even though I'm pushing Justin, we have our headphones in and we're listening to music at this point in time, and you come face to face with exactly who you are. And sometimes that's not what you want to see.
Right. Wow. And how long did the whole trip take you guys?
It took us 35 days total.
35 days.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that time is in just this place of silence and self-reflection, I can imagine.
It ebbed and flowed. Every single day was completely a unique challenge for us. It was the Camino, the stretch that we took. We started to give your listeners a kind of a geographical context. We started in southwest France, just over the French-Spanish border, in a little Basque village called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. I think that's how I say it in French. I try to get it as close as I can.
That sounded like a much better accent than my Australian one, by the way.
I'm working on it. And then you basically traverse 500 miles due west towards Santiago. It's Santiago de Compostela, which is in the northwest corner of Spain, in Galicia, the province of Galicia. So you pass through like 5 or 6 provinces through Spain, and it's it took us a while. So we walked about 6 days, and then have a rest day, and then we took one day where we took 2 rest days in a row, just because Pat's legs needed it. So
it was crazy.
3 mountain ranges and
150 miles of
desert
/
some rivers. Yeah.
Do you have a little PTSD just like thinking about it right now?
Sometimes, yeah.
When I see a hill now, I want to curl up on a ball on the floor and start sucking my thumb.
Oh, I can't imagine. Okay, so in your book description, I read the most poignant thing that you say you discovered, Patrick. You say you realized that your similarity to Justin when you became both the pusher and the push. So tell me a little bit more what that means to you.
That is a loaded question, Jessica. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of implications to kind of that mentality or that statement, being the pusher and the pushed. But what I would point back to is that, we all have challenges in life. We all have difficulties we have to overcome. Justin's, disability it's hard. It's something that you wouldn't wish on anybody, and it has a host of limitations that it brings to the table. But his willingness to invite people into that story and be vulnerable, like you mentioned earlier, has allowed him to experience things he would never experience otherwise. And that's a lesson that we can all learn. And one that I learned in grand form on the Camino. There were so many areas in my life that I was not letting people step in to help me where I had weakness. And it might not be visible like Justin's disability, but I'm a type A control freak to the nth degree. And I can't tell you how much damage that did to my family, how much damage that did to my relationship with my wife and my kids over time, because without cognitively meaning to, I made a job more important than my family. And his vulnerability, Justin's vulnerability, allowed me to open up my own heart, if you will, and invite other people into my story and start to augment me where I'm weak, so that I can experience things the way God would want me to experience them, with people at my side in community, allowing people to push me forward just as I am able to push them forward. And we can overcome so many things in life when we let people be a part of our journey. There's so many things we can overcome, but if we try and live it as an island, as a silo, man, we are in for a really, really long road. And that's what that is for me, whether it's Justin or my wife or even my kids. People are there to help you every single day, but you got to let them in.
Gotta let them in. I love that. Justin, in the chapter, Taking the Bull by the Horns, you write that you say, Patrick and I have often found ourselves outmatched by our circumstances on this journey of the Camino, but we've learned that if we live in fear and never try, if we never attempt something scary or daunting, we can't know what limits we possess. If we don't push ourselves, the only limits we face are the ones we place on ourselves, the ones we fabricate in our minds. And that paragraph just summed up your mindset to me throughout this entire journey. So tell me a little bit more about how you are pushing yourself even now, in the midst of, you described earlier you're being cared for. Do you have a full-time caregiver living with you now, or does your wife still do a lot of that?
Yeah, my wife is still my primary caregiver.
Okay.
And Patrick has stepped in quite frequently to help augment, especially when we travel and we speak all around the country and do that. So Patrick is my caregiver when we're on the road. So talk
to
us a little bit about this whole idea of pushing ourselves.
Yeah. So, it's something that in my life, I've always had the yearning to want to keep growing and keep, not pushing the limits as in, doing something dangerous that's going to, make me in that, like some sort of extreme, even though the pilgrimage was probably the biggest example of me doing that. But on a day-to-day basis, it's not quite like that. It's more of, okay, how can we make the best of this life? I have the cards that I've been dealt. We all have cards that we've been dealt. We all have the challenges that are that we're dealing with, and they can be physical, they can be emotional, spiritual, mental, relationship. You name it. And we all have something we're dealing with. But throughout all of that, you can live a life of fear. You can live a life of, man, I wish I could do this, or I wish I can do that based on my circumstances. And you can wish and dream all day long, but what it really boils down to, at least in my opinion, is taking action and following your heart. We talked about that earlier, but if you live in fear, you'll never take action.
It's paralyzing.
It is. It's very paralyzing. And what it is, there's moments. I mean, Patrick and I, even post our pilgrimage, Patrick left his job and now we work together, and it has its ups and downs. And, there's fear that we have to deal with all the time of just between the two of us, and like understanding, okay, we were just talking about that yesterday. Mm-hmm. Like, where are we supposed to go, and where's our path, and following our heart and seeking God's guidance in it. Our faith plays a huge part of not only how we operate individually, but how we operate together as friends, in our marriage, in our relationship with our children, with our small group. We have an amazing small group. They're our hugest champions, or biggest champions. Huge is just not a word. biggest
Go for it.
Biggest champions.
Just own it. Just own it.
But when you bring people in to your journey, like Patrick has said, and I hope that we've been able to at least plant that seed for others, is that when you do that, you can accomplish anything, regardless of your circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it really opens up your eyes to the world and what is available to us, especially here in America. We have it so amazingly awesome compared to most parts of the world. And yeah, I mean, I imagine as you started with your venture with Noonday, there was a lot of probably fear and trepidation and like, man, how are we going to pull this off? I mean, I'm making some assumptions here, but
the name of my podcast is Going Scared. So yes, there was a lot of going.
There you go.
Scared.
So, but I look at fear as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to see where how God can shine. But also it's an opportunity to let people augment you where you're weak.
I love that.
And all it takes is like as simple as this. I mean, if people want a prescription, I mean, this is the best way I can do it. And I'll give you an example. Hey, Patrick, can you please pray for me and help me get through this challenge? Like I'm dealing with this frustration right now. Can you help me get through that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Simple as that.
You just got to ask.
It's asking, and it's crazy. And I've talked about this a lot in a lot of my podcasts because you brought up Noonday. And yes, the journey of entrepreneurship is absolutely about going scared and overcoming fears. And you really can't be a solopreneur. I mean, that's a term that's out there that I think is false. You have to invite people into your journey. And I'm wondering, Justin, was actually surprised when I heard that Kirsten, your wife, is a Noonday ambassador.
Yes.
Because I thought, wow, I mean, she has got to have a lot going on. You guys have got kids and she's caring for you. And I'm wondering did that come from that place of like action and love, just like your why you were talking earlier about, she's like, I want to do this. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, it was exactly that. I mean, she learned about it through I believe a friend of hers, while we were, I think, in San Diego, living there in San Diego. And she came home and told me about this, this thing, like the, when you do like the people invite you into your home and
the trunk shows. Yeah.
And she's like, she said, not only is the product amazing, like the product is stellar. I mean, even as a man, I'm like, wow, that's some beautiful, beautiful work. So, she said just the mission behind it, she just loved the mission and the message behind it. And what Noonday stands for. And not only do you provide a stellar, superior product, but it's also, an organization that that supports people from all around the world. And it's about building relationships and supporting people where, giving them the opportunity to overcome their challenges and their fears. So
that was a great pitch, Justin.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, there you go. I'll bill you later. No. By the way, she told me to tell you hi. So
thank you.
But she's loved Noonday, and she is a huge supporter and loves to do what she can here in Idaho. So
yes, hey, it's a growing market in Idaho, I have to say. So I love that. Okay, so I want to pivot a little bit because you guys have a children's book coming out. My best friend's daughter has adopted. She was adopted from Ethiopia, and she only has one limb, no legs, and no other arms. So she's in an electric wheelchair. And I've walked through so closely with her as we're playing on the playground together, and just kind of the stares that happen and the questions that she gets asked. And I feel like this is an area where we aren't very well equipped, and I'm thrilled about your next book. So tell us a little bit about that children's book.
Sure.
Well, go ahead.
So this book is one that I wrote. Actually, I wrote it right when we got back from Spain. And it was one of those things that honestly feels like it was inspired and just kind of fell out of my head. And when I originally wrote this story, it was with several things in mind. What it is Justin and I's relationship, but applied to a couple of 10, 11-year-old boys. So Justin was running around with me as a kid, but what would our relationship have looked like if that wasn't the case, if he was in a wheelchair as a kid? So it's the story of two best friends, one in a wheelchair and one who's not. And so I wrote the story with our relationship in mind, really wanting to draw attention to how easy yet how impactful it is to step in and help. And a message of just love and compassion, but for kids. Really a conversation starter between kids and parents about embracing differences for what they are and letting differences be an opportunity to allow you to do more together as opposed to be dividing lines. And it's kind of written in the same vein, I guess I would say, as The Giving Tree, from where it's a story that really is a companion reader where a parent would read it with a child.
Or a grandparent
or aunt and uncle, yeah. And I mean, it's not to say a kid couldn't read it by themselves by any means, but there's a lot to it, a lot of lessons to it. So that's kind of the foundation. But then moving beyond that simple message that we often overcomplicate, it's really looking at, it's not just about disability, it's about any difference. Anything that we see separating ourselves from somebody else is an opportunity to step up to whatever that line is, step across it.
Love that.
So all that is the story, right? I mean, step up to the lines that divide you from someone that you don't agree with or that you see as different. And there's lessons in there for kids and adults alike.
Yes.
But what I love about the story so much, Jessica, is not just the book as far as the literature piece, but the illustrations. Because what happened is that I write the story, I share it with Justin, he falls in love with it. We're like, we got to do something with this. And a requirement for me, if we're going to publish this children's book, was that I wanted Justin to be a part of the illustration. Now that's going to be a challenge, right? But go back in history at my wife and I's wedding, when Don and I were married, Justin and his wife gave us, at the time it was just Justin. Justin gave us a painting that was in the kind of the Calvin and Hobbes style painting, pen and ink with watercolor, of one of our childhood haunts of sledding. And once he and Kirsten were married, he gave me 3 more in the same style: ink,
oh my gosh,
and watercolor.
I love where this is going. Right? I love where this is going.
So that had to be the style that this book was done in. It was that or nothing. That's how it's, it
was the line.
That was the line in the sand for me. And Justin's like, okay, so what does it look like? Well, you can't do line art anymore, so we got to find someone who can do that. So we put a call out on a website where there's a bunch of, kind of a hub for different designers and illustrators and whatnot. And we went through 82 proposals.
Wow.
On the 82nd one, we find a young man in Colorado, Matt Warasak. At the time, he's like 19, who can mimic Justin's style. We gave him a test and he nailed it. And so we worked with him. He did the line art and Justin was able to do the watercolor with his computer and his voice.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell us the title. I want to go click like right now. So is it available for pre-order right now?
It's available. It actually launched on April 3rd.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it is called The Push, A Story of Friendship.
The Push, A Story of Friendship.
Barnes and Noble. If you go to our website, we have some extra bonuses that are available. We have like a discussion guide and some other really cool things that we've created to help enhance the reading process with your child or grandchild. So if you just go to pushinc, pushinc.us, there's a books tab. Just click on that, and it'll take, or it's on the homepage. You can just scroll down and it'll take you to kind of a special website that we have if you buy the book through Amazon or wherever, and we have some special bonuses that are available with that too. So it's I mean, when Patrick read me the story, I was blown away. I was like, of course. I mean, there was no option. Just like how he, responded to me when I asked him about going across 500 miles on northern Spain. It was the flip. It was, yeah, of course we're going to do something with this. There's no option not to. And we didn't know what that looked like. We didn't know if it was going to be published. We didn't know if we're going to self-publish it or whatever. But we ended up getting a publishing deal with Tyndale Kids and their children's division. And, they picked it up and it came out. And so they were awesome to work with and we're off and running. So it's really cool. Really exciting to have another kind of feather in the cap. And, Patrick wrote the story and I was able to illustrate it. And it came out beautiful.
Well, we can't wait. We cannot wait. And is that really how to stay in touch with you guys? Is through your website, or are there other ways that we can keep following along on your story?
Yeah. That's the easiest way. Pushinc.us, or you can go to illpushyou.com. And that is, you can learn about our book, I'll Push You, as well as our documentary that we took a camera crew with us and created a film. And that came out on November 3rd in theaters all around the country of last year. And then now it's available for, DVDs, online purchasing and whatnot. And that's all through illpushyou.com, illpushyou.com.
Awesome.
You can find us on social media and all that. And so it's been a crazy journey that we've been on, this massive faith journey that we've been on. And it's had its moments where we felt like we want to put our heads through a wall but we kept really focusing on where our heart is telling us where we need to go. And this is the outcome of all of that. Children's book, the I'll Push You book, and the film. And we have some other things that we've released and worked on as well. So we're moving and grooving.
That's awesome. Well, true to the nature of your friendship and who you guys are, you're inviting all of us along on the journey, and we're so thankful for that. So thank you so much for your time today, you guys.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having us and all that you're doing as well. So, man, what an honor it is for us to spend time with you today too.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, Jessica, it's been a blessing for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was struck by so many things in today's conversation. And the one obvious one is simply their friendship. And I think it'd be easy to compare and think, well, I don't still keep in touch with my best friend from when I was a kid, or I moved a million times and there's no way I even have a friend like that. But I think it's easy to assume that community is happening around us and that loneliness happens to us. But it's not true. You do not have to be a victim to loneliness. Loneliness doesn't happen to you. Patrick and Justin talk so much about the secret sauce of their friendship. It was intentionality. Go be the kind of friend that you want to have. That is what creates the kind of friendship that Patrick and Justin have. I know I wanted to be a better friend after today's conversation. So think about, how are you being intentional in your friendships right now? Who are you pushing? And who are you being pushed by? Maybe it is time to buy a plane ticket and fly across the country to hang out with your old college roommate. Maybe that friend that doesn't work with you anymore could really actually use a lunch date. Being intentional requires courage because we have to be willing to show our need and our want for connection and relationship, right? Sometimes that courage is even harder than the courage required to start a business or even do something crazy like hike 500 miles. I hope today that you can think about that person that you want to push in your own life. Thanks again for joining me today, and I'll see you on next week's episode. Thanks so much for joining me on the Going Scared podcast today. If you like what you heard in this episode, be sure and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and leave a review so other people will join the conversation. If you'd like some behind the scenes looks at my life as a CEO, a mom, and a courage catalyzer, be sure to follow along on Facebook and on Instagram at Jessica Honegger, Honegger. Until next time, let's take each other by the hand and keep going scared.